The rain hammered against the windows of the small coffee shop as Marcus sat alone, staring at his phone. The screen displayed the same message he had read 100 times. "We regret to inform you that your position has been terminated." 3 years of dedication, gone in a single email. His hands trembled as he set the phone down, feeling the weight of his mortgage, his daughter's college fund, and all the bills that would keep coming regardless of his circumstances. The world felt like it was closing in around him, each thought more suffocating than the last. Across from him sat an elderly man with silver hair and kind eyes, nursing a cup of black coffee. The man had been watching Marcus for several minutes, recognizing the familiar look of someone drowning in their own thoughts. Finally, he spoke. "You know, son, I've lived 78 years on this planet, and I've learned something important. Every problem you're facing right now, no matter how massive it seems, has a simple solution hiding somewhere inside it." His voice was gentle, but carried a weight of experience that made Marcus look up from his despair. Marcus looked up, surprised by the interruption. "With all due respect, sir, I don't think you understand my situation," he said, the bitterness in his voice unmistakable. "I just lost my job. I have a family depending on me. Bills piling up. How can that possibly have a simple solution?" He gestured helplessly at his phone, as if the device itself represented all his troubles. The old man simply smiled, a knowing expression that suggested he had heard these exact words before, perhaps even spoken them himself once upon a time. The old man leaned back in his chair and wrapped his weathered hands around his coffee cup. "May I tell you a story? I promise it won't take long, and who knows, it might change your perspective." Without waiting for an answer, he began speaking in a measured, deliberate tone. 30 years ago, I was exactly where you are. Actually, I was worse off. I had just lost not only my job, but my entire business. I had invested everything, borrowed from friends, maxed out credit cards. When it all collapsed, I found myself sitting in my car at 2 in the morning, wondering if my family would be better off without me. He paused, letting the weight of those words sink in, watching as Marcus's defensive posture began to soften. Marcus felt his heart clench at the man's confession. There was no judgment in those eyes, only understanding. "What happened?" he asked quietly, his voice barely audible above the sound of rain against the windows. The old man took a slow sip of his coffee before continuing, as if gathering the memories from some distant corner of his mind. "I sat there for hours, my mind racing through every complicated scheme I could think of to fix my situation. Maybe I could take out another loan. Maybe I could flee to another city. Maybe I could declare bankruptcy. Every solution seemed to create 10 new problems. My brain was spinning in circles, each thought more frantic than the last. Then, as the sun started to rise, something clicked. I was making everything too complicated." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked, leaning forward now, genuinely curious. The old man's words were beginning to penetrate the fog of panic that had consumed him since reading that termination email. "I realized I was so focused on trying to solve everything at once that I couldn't see the one simple thing I needed to do first," the old man explained, his eyes distant as he remembered that pivotal moment. "So I asked myself a different question. Not, how do I fix everything? But what is the one thing I can do right now, today, that would make the biggest difference?" And suddenly the answer was obvious. I needed to call my biggest former client and be honest. Just honest. No elaborate pitch, no complex strategy. Just tell him what happened and ask if he had any work I could do. Marcus felt a flutter of hope in his chest. "And did it work?" he asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. The old man nodded slowly. "He gave me a small project that same day. It wasn't much, maybe 2 days of work, but it was something. It was a lifeline when I felt like I was drowning. That small project led to another, and another. Within 6 months, I had rebuilt my business from scratch, but this time on a solid foundation. But here's the important part, the real lesson I learned through all of this. He leaned forward, his voice taking on a more intense quality. Life's problems seem complicated because we make them complicated. We add layers of worry, fear, and hypothetical disasters that haven't even happened yet. We catastrophize. We imagine worst-case scenarios. We multiply one problem into 100. But when you strip all that away, when you get down to the bare bones of the issue, most problems have a remarkably simple core solution. Because 20 years before I met you, someone did the same for me. An old woman in a library when I was drowning in complexity after my wife's death. I was lost, broken, trying to figure out how to rebuild a life that felt completely shattered. She saw me there, recognized something in my face, and she taught me the 3 questions. She said they'd been taught to her by someone else, decades before. And she made me promise to pass it on, to watch for people who needed to hear it, and to have the courage to speak up. So, I've been doing that ever since, watching for people who need to hear it, people sitting alone with that particular look of overwhelm in their eyes. And now, Marcus, I'm passing that responsibility to you as well. Watch for them. You'll know them when you see them. And when you do, have the courage to interrupt their suffering with this simple truth. As Marcus walked home that evening, his mind was alive with new understanding. The rain had stopped, and the city was washed clean, everything looking fresh and renewed. He understood something profound now, something that went beyond just solving his own problems. Life's problems weren't meant to be conquered with elaborate strategies and complicated solutions. They were meant to be approached with clarity, simplicity, and one purposeful step at a time. The universe didn't require complex sacrifices or convoluted plans. It simply asked for honest, simple action in the direction of what mattered. He thought about all the people out there right now, sitting in their own versions of that coffee shop, convinced their problems were insurmountable mountains, when they were really just hills that needed to be climbed one step at a time. If only they knew what he now knew, if only someone would tell them what Henry had told him. That night, Marcus sat at his desk and carefully wrote out the 3 questions on a card. He laminated it and put it in his wallet, right where he could see it every day. He knew he would need them again. Life would bring new challenges, new moments of overwhelm, new problems that would try to convince him they were impossibly complex. But now, he had a compass, a way to navigate through any storm that might come. And more importantly, he had a mission, a purpose beyond himself. He would be someone else's Henry when the time came. He would watch for those who needed to hear it, and he would have the courage to speak up, to interrupt their suffering with this simple truth that had saved him. The simple truth remained, eternal and unchanging. Problems are only as complicated as we make them, and solutions are only as distant as we believe them to be. Strip away the fear, the assumptions, the catastrophizing, and what remains is usually remarkably simple. One step, one action, one day at a time. That's all it takes. That's all it's ever taken. And somewhere out there, in another coffee shop on another rainy day, someone else would learn this truth, and the wisdom would continue its journey forward, passed from one drowning soul to another, a lifeline of simplicity in a world that tries so hard to be complicated. Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes, but they were different from the tears of despair he had been fighting earlier. These were tears of relief, of hope rediscovered, of a burden being lifted from his shoulders. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't even know your name, and you've given me more help in 10 minutes than I've gotten anywhere else." The old man reached across the table and patted Marcus's hand with a grandfatherly warmth. "Call me Henry. And you don't need to thank me, son. Just promise me something. When you've worked through this, when you've found your way to the other side, and you will find your way to the other side, remember this conversation. Remember that the solution was simple. And when you see someone else drowning in complexity, sitting alone in a coffee shop with that look in their eyes, share this wisdom with them. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked." Over the next few weeks, Marcus applied Henry's advice with religious devotion. Each morning, before he even got out of bed, he would ask himself the 3 questions. What's the real problem today? What's one simple action I can take? Am I overcomplicating this? He discovered that the mere act of asking these questions had a calming effect, cutting through the anxiety that wanted to consume his mornings. He reached out to 5 contacts each day. Just 5. He didn't overwhelm himself with sending out 100 applications or spending 12 hours on job boards. 5 meaningful connections, 5 genuine conversations with people in his network. Some days he got responses, some days he didn't, but he stuck to the simple formula. Within 2 weeks, he had 3 interviews scheduled. Within a month, he had 2 job offers to consider, and he accepted one that was actually better than his previous position, with a company that valued his experience and offered more growth potential. But the transformation went deeper than just employment. Marcus began applying the simple solution principle to every area of his life, and it was like discovering a master key that unlocked doors he didn't even know were closed. When he and his wife argued about finances, which happened more frequently during the unemployment period, instead of spiraling into complicated discussions about every expense and every mistake they'd ever made, they asked, "What's the one thing we can agree on right now?" When his daughter struggled with anxiety about her future, paralyzed by all the decisions she needed to make about college and career, he taught her the same lesson Henry had taught him. Focus on the one next step, not the entire staircase. You don't need to see the top to start climbing. He watched as she visibly relaxed, as the principle that had saved him began to work its magic on her as well. 6 months later, Marcus found himself back in that same coffee shop. It had become a weekly ritual for him, a place of reflection and gratitude. He had been hoping to run into Henry again, to tell him how profoundly that rainy afternoon conversation had changed his life, how it had become the pivot point around which everything else turned. As if summoned by thought alone, as if the universe itself was conspiring to bring them together, the old man walked through the door, shaking rain from his umbrella. It was raining again, just like that first day, and Marcus couldn't help but smile at the symmetry. "Henry!" Marcus called out, waving him over enthusiastically. They embraced like old friends, though they'd only met once before, because some connections transcend time and frequency. Marcus poured out his gratitude, explaining everything that had happened since their last meeting. He told Henry about the job, about his improved relationship with his wife, about teaching his daughter the 3 questions, about how he'd shared the wisdom with 2 other people who seemed to need it. Henry listened with a warm smile, his eyes twinkling with pride and satisfaction. "I'm proud of you, Marcus," he said, when Marcus finally paused for breath. "But I have to tell you something, and I want you to really hear this. I didn't help you that day. You helped yourself. All I did was remind you of something you already knew deep down, something we all know but forget in times of crisis. The power of simplicity, it's inside all of us. It's our natural state before life teaches us to complicate things. We just forget it when life gets noisy, when fear gets loud, when problems pile up, and we can't hear our own wisdom anymore." "But why did you approach me that day?" Marcus asked, a question that had been in the back of his mind for months. "What made you decide to share that wisdom with a complete stranger?" Henry's eyes grew distant, looking at something beyond the coffee shop, beyond the present moment. The old man took another sip of his coffee and continued, his words flowing like a river of wisdom accumulated over decades. Let me give you another example. A few years after rebuilding my business, my daughter came to me crying. She was 16, and she felt like her world was ending. She was failing in school, overwhelmed with assignments, extracurricular activities, and social pressures. She had tests to study for, college applications looming, friendship drama, and she'd missed several homework assignments. She felt like she was drowning in responsibilities and expectations. Sound familiar? Marcus nodded, thinking of his own daughter and the similar struggles she had faced. I sat her down and asked her the same question I had asked myself years before. What's the one thing you can do right now that would make the biggest difference? She thought for a moment, wiping tears from her eyes, and said, I guess I need to finish my math homework that's due tomorrow. So that's what she did. Just that one thing. Not everything. Not the entire semester's worth of work. Just the next assignment. Then the next thing. Then the next. By breaking the overwhelming chaos into simple, single steps, she got back on track. Within a month, her grades had improved, her stress had decreased, and she had learned a life lesson that would serve her for years to come. Marcus felt something shift inside him, like a door opening in a room he didn't know existed. So you're saying I should just focus on one thing? He asked, trying to grasp the concept fully. The old man held up a finger, a small correction coming. Not just any one thing, he clarified, his voice taking on a teaching tone. The right one thing. The simple core solution that addresses the root of your problem, not all the complicated branches growing from it. See, when a tree is dying, you don't trim every leaf. You water the roots. For you, right now, what is that one thing? Not the mortgage, not the college fund, not the car payment, not all the things that depend on having money. What's the actual problem you need to solve? Marcus thought carefully, really thought, perhaps for the first time since receiving that email. He let his mind settle, pushing aside all the panicked noise. I need income, he said slowly. I need a way to provide for my family. The old man nodded encouragingly. Good. Now make it even simpler. What's one action you can take today toward that goal? Not this week, not this month. Today, right now. Marcus felt clarity cutting through his confusion like a beam of light through storm clouds. I could update my resume and reach out to my professional network, he said, and as the words left his mouth, he felt a spark of energy, the first he'd felt in days. It wasn't a complete solution, but it was a direction. It was movement instead of paralysis. There you go, the old man said with a satisfied smile. That's your simple solution for today. Tomorrow will have its own simple solution. The day after that, another one. The key is understanding that you don't have to solve everything at once. You just have to take the next right step. That's all life ever asks of us, really. Just the next right step. He pulled out a worn leather notebook from his jacket pocket, the kind that had clearly been carried for years, its edges soft with use. He wrote something down with a pen that looked almost as old as he was, then tore out the page carefully and slid it across the table to Marcus. I've written down what I call the 3 simple questions. Whenever life feels overwhelming, whenever you feel like you're drowning in complexity, ask yourself these questions. They've guided me for 30 years, and they'll guide you too. Marcus picked up the paper and read the neat handwriting. 1. What is the real problem, stripped of all my fears and assumptions? 2. What is the simplest action I can take right now to address it? 3. Am I making this more complicated than it needs to be? He read the words twice, then a third time, feeling them settle into his consciousness like seeds being planted in fertile soil. You see, Marcus, the old man said, and Marcus realized he knew his name from overhearing the phone conversation earlier. Most people fail not because their problems are unsolvable, but because they convince themselves the solution must be as complicated as the problem feels. They look for elaborate strategies, complex plans, perfect solutions, when what they really need is simple, consistent action. A person drowning doesn't need a complicated rescue plan with multiple steps and contingencies. They need to swim to the surface, one stroke at a time. Just keep swimming upward, and eventually you'll break through to air.